Hello and welcome to this latest of our Your Screen interviews with directors of the films we're currently featuring in the season. Today, I'm delighted to have with me Michael Idov. I hope that's how you pronounce your name, Michael. Is it Idov? Idov?
Yes, you
Idov.
got it.
I got it.
It's a rare occurrence, actually.
I'm sure it's not. Director of fabulous film, The Humorist, which is playing on your screen at the moment and will be playing until the 25th of April. I heartily recommend you watch the film. It's an amazing achievement, I feel, in lots of respects. So congratulations, Michael, on it's your debut feature, I think. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
as
Very kind, yes.
As director, yeah. Yeah,
Correct.
but I think you've written stuff before. I think you write with your wife. Am I correct in that?
Yes, mostly we collaborate with with my wife Lily. We wrote, I think, the most recognizable thing we wrote is either the latest season of the Deutschland '83 TV series, which I believe is actually quite popular in the UK.
I think it is. Yes.
It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
came out a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Um, and a movie called Leta, or Summer, a Russian film that was in Cannes 2 years ago that we're very, very proud of. But that is a movie by an amazing Russian director, Kirill Serebrennikov, who was under house arrest for 2 years, including while the movie was premiering. So this
Oh,
was
right. Right.
an astonishing and not entirely positive experience being associated with that movie while the director was being persecuted, and honestly, reflects itself in The Humorist a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the film about the musicians, isn't it? In the '80s musicians. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
it is. It is sort of a weird coincidence that we did two movies in a row that take place in the Soviet '80s, and then we did a German TV series
Yeah.
set in 1989. But
Yeah.
it wasn't planned; it just sort of happened that
I
way.
was gonna ask you if you had a particular interest in that precise period of Soviet history, because the Chernenko period is I mentioned
Right.
Chernenko to a couple of my friends, and they couldn't place him at all. They couldn't work out.
That's why I love that era, right? Because it's everyone remembers Brezhnev and Gorbachev, and there is kind of a blur between them, and
just for
the
that 1
student,
year or so, wasn't it? Yes.
it's
Yeah.
2 years,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
students of Russian or Soviet history may remember Andropov, who followed Brezhnev, and who was sort of he was a tough sort of proto-Putin figure, because he was also um, the director of the KGB at the moment, so came from that world, and tried to sort of tighten the screws, as the Russians say. But almost no one remembers Chernenko, who was there for like 13 months.
Mm.
And
Mm.
uh, I honestly just thought about two things. I mean, I wanted the film to be based on something I myself remember as a kid, and this is the part of the Soviet Union that I remember. It's the era, the brief era that was jokingly called hearse races in the Soviet folklore, meaning who can get to the cemetery first.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and that's the part that I honestly remember of the Soviet Union as a monolith, because after that was perestroika, and the story becomes basically about the system falling apart. But also, it was, when you're doing something about Soviet humor, this was um, a period of time where the very premise of that period is darkly humorous, because there's a joke that Arkadiev, my main character, tells in the movie about the news program starting, and the announcer comes on and says, "You're totally going to laugh, but we suffered another national tragedy," and that was the mood of the time. So I was very drawn to that.
I felt watching the film, I was really impressed. Well, I was impressed by lots of things, but the writing in particular, I felt that every line there was a sort of an irony or a kind of a very subtle allusion of some kind to be found there if you dug deep enough.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you're very kind. There is, and I'm so glad that it survives translation. Because that's a tricky thing. Because obviously, especially as a bilingual author, when I know that something's lacking in English when I try to translate it, or in Russian when I try to, there's a reason why things exist originally in a certain language if you have a choice. So by translating your own work, you sort of you resign yourself to losing a big chunk of the meaning, and I'm so happy that some of this still comes through, because not to be petty, but I read a Guardian review
Yes,
of the Humorist that was basically saying all the right things except complaining that the movie isn't funny enough. And I wanted to say that, well, first of all, it's sort of not, it's not a comedy in the sense that it's not designed to amuse you. It's more of a historical artifact of, trying to preserve the rather unfunny humor of the time. And also, of course, when was the last, subtitled comedy you've seen? Humor really does not travel, and I mean, some does. I'm not being entirely fair here, but but cross-culturally and in this sort of and cross periods, it would be very hard to make a movie about the 60s Borscht Belt comedians in the US and then have that be funny in Russian, for example. Like I wouldn't undertake that.
Well, I think, notwithstanding the limitations you described there, I found myself laughing out loud several times. I thought it was really a really funny film.
Oh, wow. Okay, well,
yeah.
Again, very happy to hear that.
Yeah. But this character, Boris Arkadiev, he's a fascinating character and brilliantly played by your lead actor. I thought it was a fantastic performance.
Yes, Alexei Ajonovich is really 90% of the reason this movie works. Absolutely. I'm very happy to be associated with him in this one, and also I'm very proud because this is his first leading film part. He's a theater actor,
right?
And there's a dialogue to be had about why an actor of his talent and his age has never been offered a lead role, which partly is explained by a sort of a kind of mild innate anti-Semitism of the system and the industry that would only see an actor like him as a comic relief somewhere. So yeah.
Well, was the character based on a real comedian of any kind, or is it an amalgamation of real people?
It is based on, I would say, about 7 of them, to the extent where the amalgamation is so spread out that it loses any meaning. Like, there are tiny references to certain Soviet comedians, like his bag is a reference to a briefcase is sort of reminiscent of another one, etc. I knew that this question was going to arise, and I wanted to kind of hide my tracks as well as I could. So because I mean, some people in Russia, including Russia, don't know that Arkadiev is a fictional character. The movie, for the longest time, the movie was listed as a biopic on the Russian equivalent of the IMDb, which actually kind of gave me a kick. I love the idea of Arkadiev just sort of becoming real in some people's heads,
Yeah. Brilliant.
But no, he's an amalgamation for sure.
Yeah. So it's brilliant. The fascinating thing about him is that he's trapped by having to conform to the requirements of the system and deliver this, tired old polished routine that he's been doing for years, but for which he is a star. He's made a fantastic living from this, but he's also trapped by the adulation in a way. There's during the dinner party scene at the beginning, which I thought was really fantastic. One of the characters says, "Oh, the great thing about Boris is that he's not an actor. When he gets up on stage, he's exactly himself." And there's Boris kind of slumped there thinking,
"Thank you. Yes,
absolutely not. I'm trapped by this."
Yeah,
fantastic.
That was that's sort of directing 101. But that was the moment where I was like, and here's where we cut to him looking entirely miserable. Yeah, but absolutely, because to me, The Humorist is sort of a movie with two basic layers. One is the obvious sort of the artist, trapped in a system movie, and there's been so many of them, and some are fantastic and are on the level that I can never even hope to reach. Mephisto is I would say the pinnacle of that genre, and I rewatched it numerous times before embarking on this one. And then of course there's Lenny and other things, but the second layer is of course, what if the system is not as scary as a person's own ego? And that's what the movie's ultimately about, because the tragedy of Arkadiev is not that he was born in the Soviet Union. His tragedy is that he has become famous for the thing he likes the least about himself. And that is, I think, something that a lot of us can relate to, because he doesn't consider, he's moderately sharp-witted in conversation, but he does not consider himself a great comic. He considers himself a great writer, a novelist, and the fact that he got famous for this, and this is what this is what people want from him. It's to him, going on stage is a daily humiliation that he can't really share, and he tells himself that this is because the Soviet system will not let a Jew be a mainstream novelist, which is true to an extent. There have been obvious exceptions, but yeah, he's there's a reason why the field of comedy is so heavily Jewish in the Soviet 80s, as well as children's literature, as well as literary translation, because those were the things that were sort of okay with people with the wrong last name to do. But partly, of course, it's, you mentioned the dinner scene, and there's a very important character there, Simeon Greenberg, his kind of loser colleague, right? This mirror image of what Arkadiev would have been if he stuck to his principles, didn't change his last name, didn't change his routines. And it's, he's sort of a comic relief character, but he's actually a very important one for the movie, because he shows that it is possible to exist without, prostituting yourself the way Arkadiev does. It's just, you just have to give up, at that point in the 80s, you don't have to give up your freedom, you just have to give up success. So there's there's that bargain with the devil that you made. It is reversible. It's not that tragic, but yeah, you just have to give up the things you're addicted to.
The other thing I really liked was just the look of the film. It struck me that you take enormous care to get the detailing really right, and the color design as well was really carefully thought about. I felt, it's just, and I wasn't in the Soviet Union in 1984, but I can kind of.
I'm so sorry. Oops. We just experienced a cameo from my cat. But,
yes. Oh, the famous cat interruption scene.
Oh my God! Yes, there you go. Okay, yeah. Sorry, it's one of those Zooms now.
Yes.
My apologies.
There's
Yes.
guarantees it's going to go viral, I think. Yeah.
Oh no, that's it. It flew off. Anyway,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. The coloring and the detail. I mean, his changing room, for instance, where he's having that conversation with the KGB guy and his agent. I was just fascinated by all the little details you put into that scene. It was just so carefully considered. And as I say, I wasn't in the Soviet Union in 1984, but I kind of imagined that this was really what it was like.
Well, that's the trick, because I wanted sort of a stylized verisimilitude. You know, um, it looks plausible without being entirely real. The props and the, you know, things like that, and the costumes are meticulously researched,
Mm.
but there's a stylistic unity to it that, of course, wasn't quite there. Like we really allowed ourselves to lean into this sort of late Soviet brutalism. Like every building is in, except that summer house in the beginning is sort of in the same kind of raw cement sort of brutalist style, and of course, and the same thing sort of spreads to the production design of the rooms. And on the one hand, it was all there. On the other, of course, we're stacking the deck a little bit, and this is a good moment, I think, to mention that, you know, the Humorist is a really interesting international co-production example, because the production designer is Latvian, so, you know, and fairly young, so he was a person who would grow up in the Baltics sort of after the Soviet Union. I'm sure he was born in the 90s, um, and the director of photography, the other person most responsible for the look of the film, Alexander Surkala, is a Czech DOP who worked on, you know, on some Czech films and some Hollywood films, and you know, most top cinematographers in Prague have that sort of interesting background because Hollywood shoots so much in Prague. So the top cinematographers have the experience of working on both local art house films and bigger Hollywood films, and they
Right.
have that kind of dual mentality. They can kind of snap from one mode to the other, which I found really valuable here. So yeah, in some ways we lit and shot it as sort of a quote unquote big movie, and in some ways we kept it, you know, to the actual low budget indie it is. Which, by the way, the decision has sort of cost us a few festivals, I have to say, because we got some feedback that sounded sort of like we love the movie's thematic thrust and its script, but like, why does it look like a commercial sort of Hollywood film, which was interesting to me because this being my first movie, it was very important for me to make a film that quote unquote looks good.
Mm-hmm.
And this might be sort of a bourgeois thing to say, but ironically, for me, making the movie edgier visually would in fact be an act of selling out, because the movie you're seeing, it conforms precisely to my idea of what a film that looks good does. We made a lot of efforts to approximate the look and feel of film as well.
Yeah.
Even in such sort of low tech ways of having a lot of fog and dust floating in the air in almost every scene, because it translates as a kind of grain
Yes.
to the finished product. Of course, these days you can add that grain on, during color correction, but we sort of did it the low tech, the old school way of actually
With real dust.
fogging up every scene as much as we could. Yes.
Yeah. I don't think I thought the look of the film really served it well. I don't think it looked sort of overdressed and glossy. It just looked really handsome and well considered. You know, the colors were fabulous. I thought, the sort of
No,
these,
we really worked. I mean, it is very considered. Like we discussed working with sort of gem tones throughout the movie and things like that. But yeah, it might not be particularly fashionable, is what I'm trying to say. But to me, that was sort of, to me, this is what the story called for. Other stories called for other visual solutions,
yeah.
and to me, it was pretty clear from the beginning that this was. The visual key to the story. It would be these sort of deep, rich but slightly hazy tones.
Mm. Mm. There was it's quite interesting, the sort of the Jewish thread running through the film. There was a comment, again going back to the dinner party scene, which was, so much going on there. There was a comment Boris made at one point about I hope the ghosts of your house don't keep you up at night, or something like that. And I read that as a kind of reference, maybe, to the fact the house had once belonged to Jews, or people that had been kicked out at some point, and was now inhabited by these fairly well-off Russians. Was I reading a bit too much into that, or was that?
No, you're correct. Except that's the one part where there's no, like, it's definitely an anti-communist joke, but there's no Jewish element to that particular one, because it just means that the people who entertain Arkadiev at their house are these sort of quote unquote progressive communist party members, right, and functionaries from the local Latvian government or party system. And so every time you see, especially in a country like Latvia, which was annexed by the Soviet Union and occupied starting in the 40s, when you see Latvian communist functionaries living in a gorgeous pre-war house, there is an immediate sort of question of who did this house belong to and how did they come by it. So the real owners of the house were probably driven away, and they were and this family was given the house by the party. But there was no there was no real sort of driving away of Jews at that moment. In fact, there was a massive deportation effort against ethnic Latvians.
Right.
And of course, sort of anyone that the Soviets would consider, aristocratic or So they're definitely living in somebody else's house, but that part is not Jewish. Almost every other joke that at the table that evening is. But
that's why I thought, because they'd had that long sort of spiel about why can't Jews go into space, or
right. This was an interesting experience for me, because this was my first time addressing my own Jewishness and generally the question of Jewishness in my work. I've never done that before. So this was an interesting sort of therapy session for me as well, to actually force myself to write it, because I'm not normally very hung up on questions of identity in my work. I mean, as much as one can plausibly be and still be a citizen aware of what's going on at the moment, including in the U.S. But generally, I've been tempted by others to address my identity as a Jewish Russian immigrant in the U.S. So a lot of times people would ask me, "Oh, why don't you draw from your immigrant experience?" And my answer was always, because at the end of the day, I'm just a white guy. It's actually boring. Like, so I have an accent, and like that's my entire identity, is that I have an accent. It's like if I take a 3-month accent correction course, like I will have no identity for you to divine when you look at me. I'll just look like the rest of Hollywood. So I've always been kind of very dismissive of this. like there's other people with real problems type of thing, you know. But I was, you know, looking at the rebirth of the sort of state censorship in modern day Russia and experiencing some of it in my dealings with Russian film and TV journalism. You know, I just sort of was forced to kind of go back mentally to what it was like being a Jew in the Soviet Union in the 80s, when there was this mild but persistent persecution accompanying your every move.
Mm. Well, I think the film is it's more universal really than that, because it asks this basic question of what is acceptable for a person to say in public, which of course is with cancel culture and the kind of things we're experiencing in the West is hugely relevant to what is going on in the West at the moment. To quite a large extent.
Right. It's almost like the switch flipped, and sort of the sort of basically arguing for this kind of unlimited freedom of speech will now almost scan as a conservative stance, whereas for 99% of my life, it stood for the most liberal thing.
Yes.
You know, the most, especially with the Soviet background, this used to stand for the most progressive thing you can possibly do is argue for absolute unfettered freedom of speech.
Yeah.
I mean, but we're going a little into the weeds now, because I don't really believe in the nefariousness or even largely into existence of cancel culture, because the real cancel culture is in the movie. This is when the government cancels you, not when private companies decide that you are a PR liability. Like that is not censorship. And I am coming from the position of somebody who has experienced real censorship. So so it's always been funny for me over the last couple of years to see the Russians up in arms about cancel culture and bemoaning the spread of cancel culture in the U.S., where while their government literally adopts laws that make it literally illegal to say something bad about Putin, or to literally illegal to say that Crimea is Ukrainian, because it's there's a law that criminalizes any doubt in quote unquote Russia's territorial integrity, which means that if you sort of say anything bad about its recent territorial conquests, you are literally outside the law. So so that is by all means cancel culture.
Yes. So our concept of cancel culture is perhaps a diversion from the real thing.
No, both exist, but it's we are in a period of an uncomfortable reckoning, and especially it's uncomfortable to think that freedom of speech may mean something else when everyone has been given essentially a media platform. So no philosopher envisioning the ramifications of freedom of speech has ever considered what would happen if absolutely everybody had the perfect mechanism to yell fire in a crowded theater at any time of day. So that's what we're dealing with now. For sure.
The other sequence in the film, which I must mention, which I thought was wonderful, was when he's whisked off in the night and ends up in this sort of bunker somewhere, delivering his routine, the mellow season. I must ask you about the name of that routine as well at some point. And he has this kind of very intimate conversation with the cosmonaut who's orbiting the Earth, and they get onto the subject of God and what would you ask God if you had an opportunity. It's very touching that session, because he's almost confronting himself there with the reality of his situation.
Absolutely,
and there's this line from his routine where he says, the monkey doesn't bite, but he might snap. And I felt as if he was almost talking about, it's almost as if Boris became the monkey at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
toward the end of the film, he sort of becomes that monkey because he just, he is. Yeah, for sure. I love the sequence when he's whisked away for the simple reason that this is the only wordless sequence in a very wordy film. So just as a director, you're sort of thinking about like, oh my God, finally people get to just like drive places, but then the sequence that follows him in the bunker talking to this invisible cosmonaut that's just a voice from a box, that is definitely, it's just such a bravura performance by Alexei.
It's fantastic.
It's because fantastic. Yeah. When we were shooting it, at some point I was like, what, my thought process was basically, what have I done? Like for my first movie, I wrote a 12-minute scene, and yes, the scene is 12 minutes long from the point from him like entering the bunker to him slamming the microphone down. It's 12 minutes, which is kind of insanely ambitious on our part, because it's just the entire scene I think is 5 shots or so. Like he did so well that I didn't have any reasons to cut away. We just, if you look at it, the scene just keeps cutting to closer and closer angle on him, and that's it. So at some point I was just terrified. I was like, this is so pretentious. Everyone is going to leave during this scene. This is the scene that will break the movie in half, and most people will never survive to the second half, because I just wrote a 12-minute sequence of a guy talking to a wall in a featureless room, and then and then Alexei just really aced that one. So that he absolutely saved me on that scene, because it was definitely high risk, high reward. Like it is a central scene of the movie, but if it didn't work, the movie would be dead in the water.
Well, I found it riveting. I thought it was a really amazing sequence. That
no, and this is this is definitely where a lot of the credit, in fact, like 90% of it goes to Alexei, and the remaining 10%, by the way, goes to the focus puller, because the way we shot with Alexei, who's again not an experienced film actor, was we decided that I'm going to let him. He didn't improvise in terms of the text. He acted the script, but we made it so that he could roam free. Like I didn't give him any real sort of marks to hit in the frame. So
no blocking.
So in terms of his body movement, he was free to move. And the camera's goal was to just sort of capture him. So when somebody is doing that, like freely moving in extreme close-up, it is almost impossible to stay in focus, because the depth of field is like this thick. Right? So like your nose is in focus and your ears are blurry, and so when we did that last shot of him just talking to the cosmonaut, and like 2 people sort of like collapsed, with sort of this happy exhaustion after the film, after that shot was over, Alexei and the focus puller, who managed to keep him in focus, like with these manual movements for the entirety of the scene.
And was that done? Was it just the one take on that, or
I think there was 2 takes. One, one in sort of medium close up and one in extreme close up. Yeah. Right. But I mean, after that take, I knew like if it was in focus, I would never need anything else from that scene. So that was it. So we checked the focus, and when it was revealed that the focus puller actually managed to keep him
pulled it off
sharp, then it was clear that we had it.
Yeah. But I think it's amazing. We've only got a couple of minutes left. What are you working on at the moment? Have you got another film in the pipeline? Are you working on a script?
Well, in fact, I've almost finished it. It's called Jet Lag.
Right.
It's a sort of kind of a Serbic romantic comedy set around set amid the Russian creative class, and yeah, it's almost over. Is and done. We're fixing up the sound as we speak, and that's another. So that's another one in Russian. And I'm preparing to shoot my first English language film. That's going to be a U.S. Canadian French co-production. It's called Aspiration, and it's about a middle-aged rock group, the musicians who rent a cottage in the woods to record an album, and then everything that can go wrong goes wrong. So it starts as this kind of mild social satire, and then slowly mutates into something very new for me, basically a sort of a bloody thriller.
All right,
So
right,
yes,
right.
I'm very excited to get to shoot that one.
Great.
Yeah, and I'm very hopeful that the people who like the Humorist will have an opportunity to check out Jetlag. Yeah.
I definitely want to check out your previous film. I know it is streaming on one of our streaming platforms in the UK at the moment, so I'll try and catch that.
Later?
Yes, yeah, I
Oh,
believe
well,
it's available. Yeah,
of course, that's just of course, Lily and I are just the screenwriters on it,
yeah,
but
yes, yes.
we're very, but we're very, very proud of it. I mean, it's and Kirill is one of the best directors possibly in the world today, definitely in Russia, and I've been learning from him ever since. So yeah, by all means, please check out Lela.
Well, great to talk to you, Michael. It's been fascinating, and we're absolutely delighted that we've got the Humorist on your screen. It feels like a real coup to us.
Oh, so am I. So am I. It's great. Yeah.
Available until the 25th of April. I think I've mentioned that before, but I'll mention it again. So, Michael Idov, thanks very much for talking to us today, and best of luck with your projects.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who watched the movie.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.